George, you had your shot last night, but we got some new faces here. Go for it.
All right. Basically, I look at public lands as a heritage that we're passing on to future generations. And my basic premise is that we should treat public lands better than we even treat our own private property. When I go to somebody's house and I'm a guest there, I don't treat that house the same way I treat things at home even. I try to treat it better. If I borrow somebody's lawnmower or whatever it might be, I try to treat it better than I would my own personal property. And what I see with the ORV issue is that sometimes it's done on purpose and sometimes it's just inadvertent with the activity. A lot of disproportionate impacts happen to the land and to other users. One of the problems is that those who don't use ORVs are displaced a lot of times. I'm a hunter, for example, and I try to avoid places where there's a heavy ORV use. And I'm finding it harder and harder to find places to go because of the growing power of the machines. The technology is making them able to go places they never could go before, and the numbers are going up. The same thing happens to a lot of other types of recreational users. People that prefer quiet recreation avoid the places that are heavily utilized by motorized recreation. It has a disproportionate impact in that regard. The other problem that I see is that sometimes, and there's a, notwithstanding what the Blue Ribbon Coalition advocates, because they're trying to do a good job, and I want to give them credit for that. But a significant proportion, and I'm going to generalize, but there's statistics to back me up, a significant proportion of people that use motorized recreation have a tendency to basically not follow the rules or the protocol or whatever you want to say. A significant number will go off of designated trails. In fact, that's sort of almost a goal in some cases. The problems presented for land management agencies is both that cultural attitude about sort of outlaw mentality as well as a lack of personnel to do any kind of enforcement. Despite the funding that is available, it's not nearly enough to hire people to do the adequate enforcement. So as a result, we have a much higher percentage of land being degraded or the outdoor experience being degraded for people than what happened with other uses. I'm going to make an analogy just to make the point. If I, for example, it became popular for going out just shooting up picnic tables or something. Maybe that's what I like to do. But in shooting up the picnic tables, I destroy the picnic tables used for other people. I make it unusable. That is in a sort of a sense what happens. And a lot of the folks that use motorized things, they're really nice people. They would never do this kind of thing on their own property. That's the irony. In a lot of cases, there would not be, some of the activities, the worst examples, and Brian would call me out and say it is the worst examples, but things like mud bogging and things like that where you're purposely trying to tear up a wet meadow, that kind of activity probably wouldn't happen on somebody's own property, and it shouldn't happen on public land. So the point is that there's a disproportionate impact. That's the first point. And the second point is a lot of the activities and things that are preferred to do by motorized recreationists can't be done in any way that doesn't have an impact on other users. When you have, for example, multiple use trails, they become, in a lot of cases, single-use trails if they're used significantly by motorized recreationists because other people don't want to be there. And it's not that the people that are on motorized things want to displace other people, it just happens to be a fact of what happens as a result of it. So one of the problems that I see with motorized recreation is that it winds up having this disproportionate impact. The power of machines are such that we are seeing more and more impacts in more and more places. And what we're at a point right now with the public agencies is as was mentioned. It took a long time to get there, but they're recognizing that the conflicts are so great that now we have to come back and do some restrictions. And those restrictions are not, nobody likes to be restricted. And I would feel the same way if it were suddenly happened to me on some activity that I like to do. And what we're seeing is that we're finding that because of the growing use and the popularity, that we're starting to do things like travel management, trying to seek out appropriate uses. One of the things that happened with motorized recreation, and it happens with some other things too, mountain biking I see it happening with too, is that the use gets established without any kind of planning. In other words, there wasn't a consultation with the BLM, for example. I'm going to start using this trail with my dirt bike. The dirt biker just started using the trail, and then pretty soon it becomes a problem. Instead, the process, I would prefer the process be that unless it's been planned and you've gone through a whole process and determined that this is a suitable place and a place we want that activity, that's the only place it should be allowed. And it has to be a place where the impacts are minimized so that they're not disproportionately large. So if this area has a lot of wet meadows along it, that might not be a place that's appropriate for motorized use, even if you put in a trail. You may not be able to build a trail that can minimize those impacts. Or it may be a place that's disturbs wildlife that's important. But unless you've done a planning process and figured that out, you don't know that in advance. And so we're at that point where we're having that planning process happening, and it's something that, of course, a lot of people dislike. Could it be possible to have Thrillcraft use on public lands in a way that doesn't have disproportionate impact? I would say yes, in theory that's probably true. But right now the reality is that isn't what happens. And getting reality to match the theoretical situation doesn't exist in very many places that I'm aware of at this point. To their credit, people like Brian and the Blue Ribbon Coalition, I think, are going to help get closer to that, so that the theoretical and the reality come closer, and the managing agencies are helping to do that too. But right now, that's not what we have on our public lands, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I had thought of letting you guys interact with each other right now, but I think in all due respect to all the people that are out there and just the numbers of them and us, let's just do this. I would like you to do this much. Just raise your hand and I'll keep track of who's first, second, and third the best I can. And unless you have to go to the bathroom, and then raise one finger like Denny. Denny's helping me.
Would you have them move their name plaques?
And then you want to do that? Okay, thanks, Denny. We were going to set this room up, by the way, the opposite. I was going to use that wall, and I had a whole bunch of cards to put behind our heads so that both you and the camera. But thanks, Denny. And if that works, I did it that way so that you guys would know each other, but I trust by now you know who's representing who, you panelists. But let's go right now. Okay, Clark, you'll be first, but please talk as loudly as you can without shouting so the people behind you can hear it. So I don't have to repeat the comment or the question. Try to keep it short and concise and precise as much as possible. If you want to direct it to certain panelists, please do. If you just want to throw it out here, well, then I'll look down to the panel left and right and see who wants to respond, if at all. So let's do that, and let's just be polite about it and go. Clark, you're first, and you're second over here, Dave.
Yeah, and I think I talk loud enough that even the folks in the back can hear me. If they can't,
raise your hand if you can't hear Clark. Can you hear him okay? No hands are up.
okay. The main reason, or the main problem that I have with the theme of George's book and his apparent attitude with regards to these public land issues is that it seems to me like folks like George and his followers are aggravating the user conflict issue deliberately. Because around here, I think we get along pretty good. We see mountain bikers, we see hikers, we see folks using the trails and enjoying them together. And then along comes folks like George saying that motorized use displaces those folks. I think you're aggravating the situation. You know, there can be legitimate user conflicts that need to be addressed, but it seems almost like hate mongering when you are centering your philosophy on the theme that we can't share. Because I think we can share. We do share. I think we should share.
Can I get you to, I think you made your point, okay? Do you want to respond?
Yeah.
And I want to, again, I'm trying to keep it short, make your point, and what I'd rather you not do is repeat your point. You know, if you've made your point, you understand, I'm not trying to be critical, but if you make your point, make it. I'll know that you've made it, I think the panel will, and then we'll move on. Go ahead, George, make a point.
Okay, Clark's major point is that he thinks that basically he sees other hikers or other users on the same trails, and that's, you know, I'm on trails where there are dirt bikes going by too, because that's the way I have to go at times, or I don't anticipate a certain type of use. Nevertheless, when there have been surveys done of public lands users, and I'm aware of at least several surveys that have been done, they find that those who are non-motorized disproportionately say that they prefer, you know, if they had a choice, they would prefer to not be on the same places and where there's a lot of motorized use. On the other hand, and you make the point really good actually by your comment, those who use motorized recreation generally are not particularly bothered by encountering, say, a hiker or a mountain biker or whatever it might be. And so there's this, it's not a, it's a one-way impact that has a disproportionate impact on the other users. And, you know, I can refer to several surveys, you know, if you want at some point. The point being, though, is simply that a lot of people just avoid those places if they can to begin with, and the ones that, for whatever reason, don't avoid it, generally would prefer not to have to be utilizing the same area. So it's a disproportionate impact in that.
Dave, hold off.
Just real quick.
Brian wants a quick point.
Yeah, real quick. I think it's appropriate to supply areas and trails for those who really are passionate about seeking that primitive recreation experience. They don't want to see, hear, or think about motorized vehicles. We should have those places. We do. The problem comes is when you expect that experience on every acre of public lands. And I think that's the theme of that's being promoted. And again, let's get in Dennis's office. Let's get maps out to show the primitive hiker where they can go. There's some great hikes around here locally. You won't see a motor, trust me.
Hold it. Next, Dave.
I think the word hate shouldn't be used, okay, number one.
Talk loudly.
Because that sets up conflict. My question is to Brian. What does the Blue Ribbon Coalition want in terms of where the off-road vehicles should go? Can you define for me what your definition of a road is? Is it based on the 1920 map? Is it based on existing maps? I get really confused because what I kind of hear is that you folks want to kind of go everywhere there's an existing trail or road. And
No,
if it's not wilderness, you want to be able to go there.
No, that's not true.
Let me, I'm going to work here a little bit.
Sure.
Dave, are you done with your point?
Yeah, I just want to know what they think.
Okay.
What they think the extent
Go
of their vehicle use should be.
Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, there's been significant closures here in the state. Millions of acres off limits for a variety of reasons. Everything from grizzly bear habitat to a travel plan. And stuff that we've, gone along with, maybe not been that happy with, or maybe had suggested that the travel plan be altered somehow. Others we don't. Others we say, no, this is a real big issue. We're going to challenge that. And it's site-specific. And it's mostly about, how important that experience is to the people we represent. And that's our bottom line. I can tell you this, though, that the level of closures has reached sort of a critical mass. Review some of the travel plans coming down in Idaho, Clearwater, Nez Perce, the recently completed Sawtooth closed a bunch of trails. Wilderness Society is currently in court trying to close more. Point I'm making is we've reached a critical mass. Blue Ribbon is likely to support that, keep everything that exists today open, because we've been closed in so many areas. The existing trails now have a high value. Now they trigger that criteria, that is it as important for motorized trails use. I will say one other thing about motorized use, real quick, about Blue Ribbons. We kind of had we kind of have an advantage over the wilderness advocates in that we're experience-based, right? If I've got an experience here, that's a certain experience, and Dave says you can't have that because he got endangered something in there. If he can give me the experience elsewhere, I'm good to go. Not only am I going to say I'm good to go, but I'm going to help him close that area. I might get out there on my dirt bike and build a fence or pound a sign or twist some arms in the local club and said, hey, you got to ride over here now. So that gives me an advantage. The wilderness advocates, Dan, they've got bills, they've got legislation, they've got hardline positions. You know, there's not much room to view in that. So I almost want to turn the question around. I want to say, how much is enough? I want to talk to George. George says, well, you got to close everything first. Well, that's nice, but it's not real. You know, there's some point you have to do something that's, practical reality.
Back to you, Dave, we'll give you one more shot.
I guess you've answered my question. It's basically you want everything. And you don't define critical mass. Critical mass to you is what you're advocating for and the group you're advocating for. And what you don't like is the fact that there's other people advocating for other groups. Some of those want quiet, like has been talked about. So unless the motorized vehicle group is willing to listen and not try and get everything, I don't see how you're ever going to get things together. You take folks that have to live by rules on wild and scenic rivers. There's no motorized vehicles there. You can take pedal bikes and whatever, but if you have a propane generator in a lodge up there, that lodge owner can't bring in a gasoline generator. He's got to bring in a propane generator. There are rules. And the reason those rules are there are so that it promotes the type of experience for people who want to go into those areas. So if we don't tie certain areas up and do certain things, we know based on what's happened that those areas are going to go away because you guys are going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's what this conference is about.
Let's stop right there.